when you put something on social media, you see the little graphs all the time of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and A, B, C, D, and people are like, where would you aim? It's easy to play Monday morning quarterback when you're just looking at a diagram of a deer.
In this episode of the Whitetail Podcast presented by Moultrie, we're diving deep into shot placement with wildlife artist Ryan Kirby.
We tend to think of deer and we look at their hide and it's just like one big barrel. And as long as we get an arrow in that big barrel, we're good.
His most recognizable work is The Anatomy of a Whitetail, a print with a detailed breakdown of a buck's skeletal and organ structure that overlays the actual body of the deer.
If you just hold your hand out with your fingers separated and just imagine that that's a deer's rib cage, right? But as you rotate your hand 90 degrees in front of you, you can see those ribs start to close down. It's kind of like a jail cell, like a Shawshank Redemption jail cell. Looking broadside at it, you could shoot through that jail cell. Now, if you imagine yourself like in the hallway of the Shawshank Redemption jail cell, those bars are a wall of iron. You're not getting an arrow through that.
All right, we have Ryan Kirby, and if you don't recognize the name, I know you'll recognize his artwork. We've done way over 100 whitetail cribs, and I would say there's about a 40 to 50% chance I'm going to see one of your pieces of artwork in one of these folks' garage, shop, house. And then if anyone's gone down the aisle to buy Winchester ammunition, they've probably seen your artwork. How is that? Is that ever weird for you? Because obviously we're friends, and it's like, oh, that's sweet. That's Ryan's artwork. Is it always strange to you?
No, it's cool. I mean, it really is sometimes weird and like surreal to think that you produce something that people want to like go to your website, type in their info, and there's a certain inertia you have to overcome. And if somebody wants my work that bad, and it's not cheap either. So someone wants my work that bad, it's kind of an honor. It's like, wow, that's really cool. Yeah. And it is cool to see. But I'm a little disappointed. I don't know whether I'd rather be on whitetail cribs because I have so many big deer, or I would rather have art in those whitetail cribs. And that's kind of a toss-up. I don't know which one I'd rather have.
I see a big deer over your right shoulder, so I think we could do a whitetail crib sometime.
It's an awful hard sell to do a whole episode on one, maybe two deer.
That's funny.
There's a lot of B-roll shots of those antlers you're going to have to get to fill a whole episode, man. Trust me.
We'll put it on the calendar for 2035, and we'll be there. Just count on it. 2035, we're going to be there.
Yeah.
So how I describe your artwork to some people, and I think this is maybe how a lot of people would view some of the pillar pieces of artwork that you have that are over your shoulders, and what I see in the wild in my travels is art meeting information, where it's fun to look at, interesting information, and this episode is really dialed into shot placement. You have a piece that shows like the anatomy of the deer, and how did that piece of artwork get birthed? Because it's kind of, when you think of artwork, it's kind of a little obscure in some form or fashion to be like, that's what I'm going to do. That seems like it'll be a pretty cool project.
Yeah. Well, I'm a farm kid. I've never really been your typical artsy type, so when I went to college, I studied graphic design. I had a knack, and I won some awards when I was in high school, and I had a really good high school art teacher. So I had the fine art side. But when I went to college, I was like, man, I went to Bradley University in Peoria, Illinois, and it's a big engineering school because Caterpillar, their global headquarters were there. I don't know if they still are, but they had a media department that Cat funded a lot of, and it was pretty cutting edge on terms of graphic design and multimedia. And being a farm kid, I wasn't like raised by artists or went to a Montessori school or anything. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this like for a living. Where I come from, you grow crops or work for the water plant or something, work for the city.
Yeah.
Art wasn't really a thing. And so I got a degree in design thinking I'll have a marketable skill that I can get a job. And then one day I'll work myself up to painting full time. And I'll never forget, you'll think this is funny, but the first design class I had, I'd never touched a Mac before. I'd never seen it. It freaked me out. I didn't know what to do. And the teacher was like, well, let's go ahead and grab your working files and drag them to the trash. And I didn't know how to do that. I'm looking around like, what's that kid doing? What do you mean drag it to the trash? I don't have a trash can. Like, I don't understand. And I thought I'm failing out of this program right now because I can't drag a folder into the trash can. I didn't know. But I learned a lot, picked up a lot of that. And really, any sort of art is communication, whether you're painting on a canvas or you're a graphic designer trying to communicate through a magazine layout or a print ad or something like that. And so there's a lot of skills that I learned there. And then when I graduated college, I worked for the Turkey Federation for about 7 years. And I got to know the industry, kind of learned marketing and branding and copywriting and all that. And the the sort of the stew of fine art, drawing, painting, graphic design, and deer hunting. I'm a deer dork, just like you are, and that sort of marinated for a while. And then when I was out on my own, I was actually at a furniture show in High Point, North Carolina. We live in Boone now, and I was at a furniture show, and they had a bunch of art there. And what people don't realize is when they look at like furniture trends or products in retail, they were produced a year or two before. Like they may have been dreamed up 2 years ago. And so people think like the cutting edge trends that they see in the mall and stuff, that's super recent. Well, that was done over a year ago. You're just now seeing it. So this place had all kinds of new furniture and decor and home decor. And that's why I was there. One of my licensees was there and I was meeting them. And I saw a big poster of butterflies. And it was super cool. They had all the different butterflies and a little bit of information. And I thought, man, I wonder if there's something like that I could do for game, like big game. And so I came up with the idea of the waterfowl flyways of North America first, where I sketched all the species of waterfowl, their heads, and then like an action shot with their body. And then I hired a designer to put it together in a 20 by 30 print. I researched all the length and the population estimates, and I work with biologists from Ducks Unlimited to proof all of it, and kind of dorked out on the whole thing. And I remember I had to sketch 3 ducks a day. That's what I made myself do because there were like 30 some or whatever. So I did all these sketches and we got done in August, and we had a press date of like mid-September. And I was like, I wonder if there's anything I could do with deer while we're at it. And I thought, man, it'd be really cool to do something that celebrates like the life cycle of a deer, how they change, the info, the anatomy, all the things. And so I came up with the idea of the growth and maturity of the whitetail buck, sketched all that out, had it designed. And when I start there, I come up with the concept, I research it for a couple weeks, I write all the copy and kind of whittle the information down to what will be a cool graphic, then do the fine art for it. The designer puts it together, I proof it, and we had biologists from the NDA, Kip Adams and Matt Ross, review it. So it's a big, long process. But when we first launched those, the growth and maturity and the waterfowl, they were a big hit. And the growth and maturity has been our best seller. You probably see that one all over the place. And then after that, I wanted to follow up with something different. So I came up with the anatomy print. We have a Grand Slam print for turkeys. And then I did the scoring and field judging print. And they kind of follow the same mold, the same kind of a vintage style, same fonts and all that kind of stuff. But you know how it is in the deer world. You can go down rabbit holes super deep, super deep. And so I kind of let myself go down those rabbit holes and then find a way to craft a piece of art around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Long answer, I know. Sorry.
no, that's really fascinating how all that comes together, and it does become a resource, or it's in the garage or it's in deer camp,
Mhm.
and everyone goes up and points and like, oh yeah, I think he was maybe 4 or 5. He kind of looked like this. You see this
Yeah.
feature, that feature. It's pretty cool how it's aesthetically obviously very visually pleasing, but also
Mhm.
informational and helpful for people to have a conversation. Now,
Mhm.
with it being October, everyone's working towards that opportunity to actually go full draw, find their anchor point, squeeze off the shot, and have it go exactly where they're aiming. But I think one thing that probably can't get enough. I don't know how to say, like, I don't want to say attention, or like attention to detail of like picking the hair, picking the spot of where you need to aim. And you have
Mhm.
you've done some content on shot placement. How did an artist meet anatomy for
Yeah.
those pieces of content?
It's a great question. Um, I've always been like, I was an athlete in high school, and I bought like Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, and me and some buddies, we'd lift a lot, we would train a lot, and so you get into exercise and physiology, um, and like I was saying, when I grew up, like I didn't have any special training. I just developed an artistic ability. I had some natural ability in my high school art teacher, but then I drew what I thought was cool, which was deer and turkey and ducks and elk and stuff. So you go right into portraying biology. And there I was actually at one point in college, I was really confused, I think my junior year, and I was going to be a medical illustrator. And at that time, this was 2002. We didn't have all the design, the video, the AI, Pixar, I'm not even sure was a thing yet. So when you like went into the doctor's office and they shut the door and there's like big graph of like the intestines,
Yeah.
like an artist drew that, sat down and drew that and illustrated it and created it by hand. And I was going to do that, but eventually I started looking at it and I switched my curriculum all up. At one point I had a major and three minors. I had a I had a graphic design major, a minor in fine art, multimedia, and biology because you had to have biology prereqs to get in. But what I found out was you basically had to go through med school, literally sitting next to doctors, but instead of operating on it and paying big bucks, you got to draw it. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go to school for another 4 years to do this. So I got my degree and just got out. But I also studied a lot. We did life drawing classes my freshman year. That was a prereq. And that's where you have a nude model. Like, I don't know if, and everybody jokes about that. I don't know if you've ever seen the Will Ferrell on Saturday Night Live where he's a homeless man that gets hired as a model to come in
No,
for
I
the
need to look it up.
dude. I'll send it to you. It's hilarious. But you literally, they were all female. We didn't have any dudes. But you're in class and the teacher walks you through part of the anatomy, and then halfway through the semester they start bringing in live models, and they take a robe off and they're buck naked, and you draw them, with the class. And one thing that you learn about anatomy and biology is that form follows function. So the skeletal structure is the basis for everything that we do, like protecting your organs, walking, running, jumping, all that kind of stuff. Our brain is inside of a cranium, so that it's protected. Like our fingernails, everything that there's a function to why we look and act and the form that we are. And so what you were taught is you were taught to like find the skeleton first. So I would mark like the shoulder joints first, and then align where the spine was and the rib cage, and you would you would lay in the model based on the skeleton, and then you would fill the form on top of that. You'd add the muscles and then shade the muscles and things like that. But and the reason was, you can shade a bicep perfectly, but if the arm is too short, it looks weird. So
Mhm.
you have to get the proportions, the form right. It's kind of like pouring footers before a house. Like you've got to get that foundation of the animal or the human correct before you can do anything else. And that really resonated with me, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it. A lot of my work from that point on kind of flowed out of that. And then, as I got older, I translated some of that knowledge to deer and elk and turkeys. You've got to understand some of their anatomy in order to portray them accurately, and you've got to understand how their anatomy works. This is a little bit of an art dork tangent, and then I'll leave that alone. But one thing that it's hard to do as an artist is to show tension. If you want a big deer, you want to show the legs are taut, the front shoulders are taut because it's weight bearing, and when that animal's walking, the way that you draw the legs will show that it's bearing a load. And you do that by naturally tighter lines, more contrast. The same way that a bodybuilder's muscles are defined when they're flexed, you've got to understand that that leg is supporting a load, and so you draw or paint that in a certain way to help communicate that that's a big deer, or he's in action, or he's running, or something like that. And so a fundamental understanding of anatomy is really helpful for an artist, is what I'm getting at.
Mhm.
So
When when for someone that's not an artist listening to this, you mentioned form follows function. So to get a really good vision for people to maybe train their own eye on where and what that scapula is or where the rib cage is that
Mhm.
something that you would suggest people to pay really close attention to when they're sitting in the stand just watching a deer to kind of
Oh
build
yeah.
up that because you have the artistic vision and be like, okay, this is where the vitals are because obviously you have a lot more experience with drawing and
Yeah.
illustrating it, but for just the everyday guy, is that something that you would highly suggest?
Oh, absolutely. This is where I become a huge dork. I'll sit in my stand, and a fawn, fawns are always the first to run out to the food plot, and I'll get my binoculars up and I'll look at that tendon running off the back of the leg, the tarsal glands. One thing that's fascinating to me is, when deer walk, a lot of times they're buried in leaves or, food plots or grass or something. But when you see one that's on like flat level dirt, how far those dew claws sit up. It's almost like they're a ballerina walking on tippy toes. And if you
Mm,
you like check out a deer in a scrape next time and look how far that dew claw sits up. It's like they're walking on tippy toes.
yeah.
Um, but man, I will follow the angles of the leg and try to find the ribs. And if you ever see pictures of a lactating doe, like in the early summer, they're skinny as a rail because they've drained everything into nursing their fawn, and they'll show you everything they've got. You'll be able to see their skeleton like crazy. Big muscular deer, bucks swollen up in the rut. That's harder. We had one of our models in life drawing class was a little bit overweight, and it was notoriously hard to sketch her because you couldn't find some of the joints. You know what I'm saying? And then we had one that was skinny as a rail, and it's easy. It's night and day trying to draw that. But I I spend more time. I'll look at a doe or a small buck in my binoculars at 30, 40 yards for half an hour.
Mhm.
And then I catch myself like, dude, you are the biggest nerd ever. Like,
I feel like it's got
look
to
at the
be
angles.
it's got to be good repetitions just to constantly visualize potential shots and really
Yeah.
trying to like pick the spot even on a deer you have no intention of shooting
Hmm.
because the reality of it is most people that have regular jobs and have limited time and like for you take an Illinois rutcation every year, it's like realistically your whole season boils down to probably one shot opportunity for most
Hmm.
people, maybe two or three if you're lucky, but realistically it's about one shot opportunity for someone that's hunting semi casual and even above, not super hardcore and hunt 50 times a year, but that 10 to 15,
Yep.
probably one or two opportunities. And so
Yeah.
that's not a lot when you think about it.
No, and it helps a lot. As a bow hunter, learning that. Like I try to think, if that fawn quarters away, okay, where am I going to aim? I'm going to follow that back leg up, and I'm going to aim right here and try to kind of pick a spot. And they say it in sports all the time. You typically fall to the level of your training when you're under stress. And so if you can get reps in, if you can observe and just mentally kind of walk through that a number of times before the moment of truth, I feel like that can't do anything but help you.
Yeah. Is
So,
there a time or a recent story, or I guess this really could be any time period of your hunting career where you just flat out aimed at the wrong spot and got the wrong outcome because of
oh yeah, dude. um,
it?
that's one thing that we've talked about before is, when you put something on social media, you see the little graphs all the time of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and ABCD, and people are like, where would you aim? Um, Everybody's like, "Oh, I'd aim for C2, like
Hmm.
C3, you're screwed. You're never gonna find your deer." I'd go C3, but 4 hairs up and a centimeter forward, and it's like, dude, in a hunting scenario, maybe I'm just not that much of a sniper, but like it's easy to play Monday morning quarterback when you're just looking at a diagram of a deer. But finding that and executing it in real time, there's just so many variables.
Hmm.
I mean, first off, your shots are not going to be as good under pressure. You're not standing on flat ground shooting 40 yards perfectly downrange at a broadside deer. There's all kinds of stuff there. Um, and so, as hunters, we always do the best we can. We try to rehearse our shots, but a lot of times you just have to go with on the fly. Like in sports, it's like you got to take what the defense gives you. Like we can rehearse these plays over and over flawlessly, but sometimes you just have to make it up as you go. And I think that's where having like a basic understanding of anatomy is. But just last year, honestly, I took a shot at a deer it was quartered to me and it was close. And I shot an elk last year and he was quartered to me. And at one point, I had my sight pin on his front shoulder, like the scapula, you could see it. And it's like, okay, I have to go behind this or in front, behind or in front, behind or in front. And he was at like 8 yards. It was close. And he took a step towards me. And so I went in front. I took almost a quartering two / frontal shot, hard quartering two. And he ran, I don't know, 40 yards and piled up. And I was doing the same thing with that on this deer. And I went behind the shoulder. And just everything's happened so fast. But in hindsight, what happened, I think, was he was quartered too far and it skipped down some ribs. And it basically never got into the body cavity. I don't know if it just caught a bad break. I don't know really what happened, but it skimmed down his ribs and the exit wound looked like a gut shot on the side towards me. And I didn't really know it at the time. I thought he was a dead deer. I thought I probably got one lung, liver, and guts is what I thought happened, which is not ideal, not what you want, but it is lethal. And, we went in, this was in the evening. We went in the next morning at like 9 a.m. and just started tracking really slow. And dude had a ton of blood, great sign, to the point where it's like, we're just going to walk up on this deer. And then we bumped him and he starts limping up the ravine on the opposite side. I had debated trying to stalk him and try to get another arrow in him because it was really windy. But I just didn't know if I could do it. I hadn't talked to the neighboring landowner and that was a pasture and I didn't want to just walk on their place without talking to them. So we backed out and I actually got Tracker John to come down.
Yeah. I've seen him in DeerCast or in the deer, the Drury app. And that had to be pretty, he's kind of a legend when it comes to deer track.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. And a very eccentric dude. And I don't know how he does it. So he is posted up at an outfitter there in Western Illinois, and that's his primary job. Like they pay him room and board. He's there through the whole hunting season. I think he lives in New York. And he comes in September and leaves in January.
Whoa.
And that is his job. But he's allowed to pick up like freelance gigs on the side. And so he'll literally text you like, hey, I've got 2 blood trails coming in after dark. We'll see what we can do. I might hit you at 1 a.m. Just be by your phone. And it's like, he may not sleep for 2 days. Like, no joke. He may not sleep for 2 days. So you're kind of on his schedule. And so I was texting him details of the shot and everything. And so we end up going in. Dog gets right on the trail. And we end up bumping the deer again at like, this is maybe 200 yards from my stand. Mm-hmm. Maybe further, maybe 250. We ended up bumping the deer again, and he thought our chances of getting the deer were great, but he went in this bottom. There were 2 other dead deer in the bottom, which didn't help because they had been there for a couple weeks and they were stinking the place up. And dude, we lost the trail from then on and never recovered it. It's one of those things like Tracker John has seen everything and he's like, I've never seen this before. So it is what it is, but it's awful. It's an awful feeling, man.
Yeah. Well, anytime you have to call, I mean, it's always admittedly, I've had a dog tracker, and it's like, it's crazy to watch their knowledge and how they interact with their dog and all those different things. Like, it's almost a privilege to see that, but you hate that they're there because it means you didn't execute a shot the way you needed to. And their level of experience is just, they track more deer in a year than probably what most people do in a lifetime. And so it's like, it's such a unique opportunity to learn so much so fast. But at the same point, it's like, man, I hope I never have to call you again. No offense.
Yeah. It's like, dude, you're worth every penny. I never want to have to hire you ever again.
Yeah.
But he's a super cool dude. And like you were saying, he's seen about everything. So he's seen a lot.
So in hindsight, you could go back, you could relive that moment. Would you have taken that shot, or what would you have done differently in that scenario from the moment you pulled the trigger or the release or
Just
whatever.
been patient, not
Yeah.
taking the shot, you know? And again, you can Monday morning quarterback anything, and you can critique anything you want, but, one thing I've also seen a lot too when turkey hunting and somewhat deer hunting, like when you're bow hunting, you see a lot more than when you're gun. And when some of the recurve guys, like we've talked about, I learned a lot hunting from recurve guys, but, a lot of times, and I've seen this as well when I'm like photographing or just videoing deer and I'm not gonna shoot them. You have more time than you think. Like,
Mm,
that first opportunity might be one of 7 you get. It may not be. The deer may be gone quick, but a lot of times we're so ingrained to just take the first shot. Any shot we can get, the first one we can get. And I think as you get older and get more experience, you realize, I'm just not going to take that. And you may get a better shot after that. And I
mhm.
think, you got to hold yourself to your own standards. This is what I'm willing to do. This is how far I'm willing to shoot, and I'm not going past that, no matter how tempting it gets. And I just blew it. Is the bottom line. I think if I would have waited, I probably would have gotten a better shot and taken that.
Yeah.
But
I think I feel like that's probably just a general upbringing of like, whenever you get an opportunity to take a shot, meaning like
Mhm.
whenever like 35 yards and it's a pretty tight window, but hey, that's my first opportunity and I'm going to try to squeeze it through. And
Yeah.
then, you're exactly right. Picture that with a 2 or 3 year old. You have no intention to shoot and you're like, okay, this would have been my first opportunity. And
Mhm.
now he's 15 yards away, completely broadside in the wide open.
Yeah. And
I,
now he won't leave.
right.
I'm gonna throw rocks at him.
Right.
That
Yeah.
happens with turkeys all the time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice there. Now, you talked about some of the trad guys, old school
Yeah.
hunters that you learned a lot from. What's one or two lessons that stick out to you, or even a story um, that just really is the top of your brain when you think of old school deer hunters?
Well, Dave Emkin is like a mentor to me, and he's like a legend. He's my buddy Ed's dad, and he has hunted everything you can name under the recurve. Has Boone and Crockett books, records all over the place. He's been a Boone and Crockett scorer and a taxidermist, so he hears a lot of stories coming into his shop.
Hmm.
Not to mention, he's done it a lot. But the first thing is the way they set their stands up. I mean, when you're a recurve guy, you're not sitting over a food plot that's an acre and trying to shoot the whole thing. You have to find like the spot within the spot. So they're hunting a lot of little ditch funnels and crossings and holes and fences and stuff like that. And I think it's kind of like with turkey hunting today too, that everybody's talking about loads that can shoot 60, 70 yards or whatever, but it's a different level to get that turkey within 40, within 30, within 20 or whatever. And I learned a lot from that. And I think it has to start there. It really has to start with how you game plan your setups, how you set up, all that kind of stuff. But then I also learned a lot from anatomy. Boy, those guys avoid the shoulder like the plague. You can't hit Dave always shot those big Magnus. I think they're Magnus broadheads, and but man, and they'll do damage. They get into a deer and they start moving around and twisting and cutting, and those things will do a lot of damage. But dude, if you hit bone, they don't work if they don't penetrate.
Hmm.
Um, so there was one story where Dave shoulder shot this deer. I think it was high 160s, just a tank of a deer. He came in kind of on the ridge above him, and he was real close. He was probably within 15 yards. Shoulder shot him. The deer ran off. Me and my buddy Michael went to help him track, and he did a big loop in the cover. He never left that block of timber, did a big circle, and we found 10 or 12 spots of blood the whole time. Um, so his son Ed goes in the same tree 3 days later and kills him.
Mm.
Uh, and so, the deer wasn't phased. He wasn't really that hurt by it. He got shot with a big, fat Magnus sharp broadhead in the shoulder, and it didn't kill him, didn't phase him. So, that's one that sticks out. As hunters, we never want to aim for this. We don't like it when it happens, but a gut shot is always lethal. Like they can't survive it.
Mhm.
And I don't know how far in the weeds you want to get with that, but
Well, I would just interject real
Those
quickly.
guys just
Yeah,
they stay away from bone, man.
yeah,
Those
but
recurve guys.
yeah, a gut shot is never a good feeling. But I think the next steps after that poor shot are the most important to not push the deer and
Yep.
like what I'm sure the traditional archery guys probably have quite a bit of experience of like, okay, I know where I hit them, and this is the game plan. We need to give them 24 hours or 16 hours
Yep.
or whatever it is, and I feel like they stick pretty true to those. Where a lot of people, I feel like they're maybe in denial that they shot him in the guts, and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
I think I got one lung liver, and he probably only went 150 yards. Let's go look right after dark, and then they
Yeah.
bump him, and then that we know how that story typically ends.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I'll tell one real quick story. This is kind of a fascinating story. You don't need to be interviewing me. You need to have him on the podcast. He's a wealth of hunting stories. But this, we call him the sage because if anybody wounds a deer, his phone starts blowing up after dark to see like what they should do. So my buddy Michael hit one. He was walking and he hit him high and a little far back. So like middle of the body high. He didn't spine him because the deer ran off. But Michael was all bummed out. We were all kind of bummed out. And Dave's like, look, here's what you need to hope. You need to hope and pray that he breaks his back. Okay. Because it sounds to me like you cut some of the tenderloin and like backstrap tenderloin area. And he's like, those are the muscles that stabilize his backbone. He's like, if you cut one of those, he's going to break his back the first time he goes to jump a fence, and you'll have him there. Now you'll have to go finish him. It won't be pretty. You'll have to recover him, but that's what's going to happen. Now, if he just runs straight across the field, he may go for a mile. You're probably not going to find him. He'll lay down somewhere. But if he's got to jump, you might find him. And dude, they go in there the next day and they hunt the next morning. That's another thing I learned from Dave too, is go hunt the next morning because you may see a coyote, you may see a doe across the field blowing at a certain spot in a brush pile. You might see vultures that early, or you may see your deer again. If it didn't phase him, he may be chasing does out there again. But if you shoot one that night, go hunt the next morning, same stand, and kind of just observe what you observe, and then get down at 9:00 and go look for him. That's what they did, and he called it. That buck went up to a fence, jumped it, and from then on, it was just blood everywhere. And there the deer was 30 yards away. And they had to finish him with another arrow, which is never good, never pretty. We don't want that. But that's the kind of stuff that like a dude that has hunted with a recurve for 50 years, he's seen that before, They're the type of guys that if the deer's bleeding and they know it's not vital, he's like, we just need to push this deer. Push him and 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 not let this get clotted up, stuff like that. And
yeah,
there's no way you can learn that without just experience. No way. So
I've never even heard of that scenario or that thought process, but it makes sense. Like he called it. That is nuts. If I called him and he told me that, I'd be like, man, I'm screwed and this guy's crazy. That's probably what I would have thought. Not knowing him and his nickname and his experience, but you got to build that up. But regardless, that is totally insane. That is nuts.
Yeah,
that is
crazy. Wild, man.
Man, so go ahead. Do you have a thought?
Not really.
Okay,
you take it where you want.
Yeah. So let's just show people if you're up for it on kind of the breakdown for shot placement. Obviously you have artwork. There's a million videos out there on different shot placements, but I think you've done some various versions of artwork of like kind of breaking down how to rip the fur off the deer and visually see the vitals, in anatomy format. Are you up for that challenge on the spot?
Sure, man. You might have to guide. You might have to lead me where you want me to go with questions, though.
Okay. So,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I do a lot of research. When I do these prints, I just do a lot of research. And I even remember when I was working on it, my son Rhett shot a doe with a rifle. It was his first deer, and he loves to process it. And I've completely taken the hide off and separated the shoulder blade, and gutting and processing and skinning some deer will really help you. I haven't done that a million times. I've done it, 10 or 12. But when you do that with that in mind, it really helps you understand a lot Like, for example, a lot of people may not know that the shoulder blade is not connected like ours are. It's not in a socket. You know, you can just a couple slices and that thing falls off. It's not connected bone to bone with a socket into the cavity like ours are. And I think people can pick up a lot and learn that a lot from just processing a deer, from skinning it, from observing it, and things like that. I mean, we can go through some of the things that I learned because I always learn a lot when
Yeah.
I lay these prints
Yeah.
out. You know, one thing that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but something I've observed, like in my scenario, and my buddy Michael shot one time that was quartering really hard away, and it skipped down the ribs and left like a foot and a half gash on the side of the deer, and then hit the back of the shoulder, and then just flopped out. So the arrow just had some hide and some blood on it. Saw the deer on trail camera a couple days later. He just had a huge gash. But you know, if you when it comes to quartering away angles, if you just hold your hand out with your fingers separated and just imagine that that's a deer's rib cage, right? The ribs in and of themselves are not really hard. They're not big, they're not tough, they're not hard. But as you rotate your hand 90 degrees in front of you, you can see those ribs start to close down. It's kind of like a jail cell, like a Shawshank Redemption jail cell. Like looking broadside at it, you could shoot through that jail cell. Yeah, you might hit a rib, it might deflect, but it's very rare that you're going to hit a rib and it's going to stop the arrow. Like it's going to go through the rib cage. We've all seen that. But if you imagine yourself like in the hallway of the Shawshank Redemption jail cell, those bars are a wall of iron.
Mm.
You're not getting an arrow through that. And so every angle that deer quarters to or away from you, you have to think about that. The ribs aren't that hard, but they can turn into sort of a wall of bone. And so at that point, you either have to say the deer's quartering away. At that point, you've either got to get it inside that back rib or nothing. And if they're quartering to you, that's where people say like to shoot them in the front of the brisket. You've got to get it inside. You got to shoot into like the barrel of the rib cage. You can't rely on like getting an arrow through on the side if they're quartered real hard.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing on the quartering shot too is the diaphragm. I think Kip Adams was telling me some of the studies and stuff about that, but the diaphragm is a lethal shot. The diaphragm is what we have to cut away, the kind of thin livery thing that we have to cut away to get to the vitals when we're field dressing them. On a quartering away shot, the diaphragm is how the deer regulates the air pressure in their lungs. And it's almost always vital when you hit that thing. So even if you could necessarily go on a quartering away shot, chances are you're going to hit that diaphragm. You're going to slice through it. So that's something we don't ever really talk about much. We always talk about heart, lung, liver, guts. But that diaphragm is really important for deer. We talk about the vital V a lot. That's a big one. That's over. I don't know if you can have an anatomy discussion and not talk about that these days. Man, again, I know that there's a lot of guys out there that are like, well, I shoot a 900 grain arrow and a fixed blade made of German steak knives. And I've never found a deer I couldn't kill, yada, yada. And that's great. But there's a lot of like elitist stuff on that. I have a lot of kids that follow me. I get letters every week from kids that learn stuff from my anatomy print, like 12-year-olds.
That's cool.
And oh man, it's awesome. But I'm not going to tell a 14-year-old shooting 46-pound bow, oh, aim for the shoulder, buddy. You'll blow right through it. I'm like, no, you're not. You're going to break that kid's heart because he's going to shoot one in the shoulder and you're never going to find it.
Yeah.
And so I don't buy into that just because, dude, there's a lot of women and kids out there or older people that they can't do that. They're not shooting 80 pounds in a 500 grain arrow,
Mm-hmm.
So that's great if it works for some people. A lot of people it's not going to work for. And I think to preach that as gospel is a dangerous thing, The other thing is as you get further forward into the vital V, the rib cage actually gets smaller. a lot of people don't really realize it, but like the rib cage doesn't run in a perfectly horizontal line across the deer's body. It starts to dip down between the shoulder blades before it comes back up for the neck. And so literally the size of the rib cage is shaped more like a pear than a barrel, right? A perfectly
Hmm.
sized barrel or a perfect cylinder, where like the narrow end of the pear is where the heart and lungs are. So the Vital V to me going way far forward, yes, it's a great shot, but it gets riskier because you're throwing more bone in there than ever. You've got shoulder bones, you've got a scapula, you've got the rib bones are tighter. There's some vertebrae in there. There's just more of that stuff. And so it gets a little bit riskier. And so on a lot of like the places that we say to aim on my art, you just follow like the back crease of that front shoulder up,
Hmm.
kind of where we've always been taught to aim.
Hmm.
And that's where personally I hold. And I think a lot of people, especially beginning people, would be good to start there.
Yeah. I
So
think, yeah, I inherently, admittedly, I probably aim up. I think there was an app I was watching as I was preparing for my elk trip. I was watching, obviously, they're anatomically very similar, but much larger animals, like where exactly to aim on an elk, right? And there was
mhm.
this app called, what's it called? Bow Hunt Simulator. It's like
Yeah,
299, 399, and it's actually really cool. And I was going through it, and it shows exactly where you're hit, and it's pretty for anyone that's new or even people that are like me. I was inherently like one lung liver, one lung liver, one lung liver,
yeah,
uh, because I was scared. I've been scared to hit the shoulder. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I think that was a really fresh reminder of like, okay, I'm just aiming too far back. Like that's where
yeah,
I'm naturally gravitating towards because there's
yeah,
way more, it's more forgiving. But it was pretty eye opening, and it sounds silly, but I'm glad I paid 299 or whatever it was because it, it it updated the bullseye for me. It really
yeah,
did. I don't know.
yeah. I personally I like to hug that, and it's not really a crease because the shoulder goes the bone of the shoulder gets up to the body and then it goes forward and back. That's how it forms the V. The scapula is the back part. Um, so you do have it's not like the shoulder comes perfectly up from the leg. It makes a big pocket there. And so I always just aim straight up that back crease.
Hmm.
So and also again, I'm not a sniper like everyone on social media apparently is, but um dude, I always feel like if you're shooting golf balls at 30, that turns into a baseball in a hunting scenario. If you're shooting baseballs, that turns into a softball. If you're shooting softballs at 50, that turns into a volleyball. If you're shooting volleyballs, that turns into a pie plate in a hunting scenario. And so, yeah, it's awesome that you can, stack them inside of a baseball at 50, but that it does widen there. And as it widens, you're just starting to play with a little bit more fire, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Um, I was thinking about it before our podcast, and you're an investing dork like me, and I love some of the investing stuff that you have on the Land
Yeah.
podcast. And I mean, if you had to rate it as far as risk, the guts are like the bond market of shot placement. Like, it's not pretty. It's nobody talks about it at cocktail parties, but it'll work. It's just going to take time. You start moving up into the liver and double lung. That's more your stocks. But dude, the very front part of that Vital V is like crypto. You know what I'm saying? Like
It's
you
volatile
you
and it can be
may
great. Yeah.
there's a very good chance if you hug that, dude, you may be one of those spewing blood videos in the food plot like we see on social and a deer's piled up at 40 yards, or you might be calling Tracker John. And I will
Yeah.
give you his cell phone because he's very good. But like you're just gambling so much more. And like in my scenario where I screwed up, a quartering angle can play into that. And
Hmm.
there's a lot of times, man, like you draw on a deer and you get settled and you're trying to find your pin, and he may take a couple steps at quarter an angle that you didn't really see as you're finding your pin and settling. And it just, I don't know, man. I wouldn't encourage a lot of people, and again, mainly because a lot of younger people and newer people follow my work. I wouldn't encourage it, but
Hmm.
it's
What
just me.
what is your shot process? So I'm gonna throw a scenario at you, It's let's go with a date that everyone likes. November 7th in the morning, high
Yeah.
pressure. There was a cold front the day before. Leaves are crunchy, and you're in a pretty semi dense area. There's multiple
Mhm.
rows. There's some honeysuckle. There's, it's kind of thick in there. You can't see super far. And you hear,
Stupid honeysuckle.
and you hear
Hate it.
it's everywhere though. So that's why we can use it
Yeah.
as a visual.
Yeah.
And you hear, and it sounds really far away.
Mhm.
And then you're like, okay, I'm hunting this deer in here. What is your process from that moment forward? And so that could even go retrospectively of like, okay, I know my range is like, give us the breakdown for that exact moment.
Mhm. Well, I'm gonna try to get stood up unless, I'm pinned down by does or something. I like to hunt a lot of thick cover, so I feel like I can that's a very scenario I'd be in. I always like to stand up, get my bow off the hanger. Now, it at prime time first light, I'm probably already there.
Hmm.
But if this is 10 a.m. and I'm scrolling Instagram, regretting my life decisions up to that point, then I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna get my bow. Everything starts with your feet, man. And I tell I'm a football coach for my son, and he's plays baseball too. And I'm not an expert, but I work with him a lot after that. Everything starts with your feet. Everything starts with your stance, whether you're hitting, fielding a ground ball, throwing a football. And I always try to get my feet right. And that's where my process starts anyway. So I set my feet, draw with my back, find my anchor, settle my pin, focus on where I want to shoot, and then squeeze,
Hmm.
and then squeeze with my back. That's kind of my mental process. So my mental process is feet, draw with your back, find it, focus, follow through. Like that's the thing I do. And so I'm going to try to do that as much as I possibly can in a hunting scenario, and I'm going to try to get my feet set. Um, from there, it's a lot of. I'm probably not going to clip into my bow yet. I look at deer's racks at 30 yards because I've shot deer that I thought were bigger. I'll say it that way. They had some ground shrinkage, and you don't want to regret a deer. It's not all about the size, but there are times where I've been surprised that way. So I'm going to get a good look at the deer before I decide I'm going to shoot. Um, and a lot of times when you're trying to hunt a big deer, it's either a hell yes or a no. Like if you're looking at him like, I don't know. Does he have G4s? Yeah, if you're doing that kind of stuff, just don't don't draw, don't get ready to shoot because you're probably not gonna love the outcome. Um, but I'm gonna take a really good look at that deer's rack with my binoculars, see if I know him, and then try to anticipate where they're going to go. If you can try to pick your shots, and I try to pick all that stuff beforehand anyway, and then adjust my sights if I need to, and then try to execute the shot. So I do tend to like to stop them. I try to mant at them, which
Hmm.
when you're when you've been sitting for hours and haven't had anything to drink and you're excited, your man sounds like a ma or a like you just can't. You're like a teenage boy, and his voice is cracking. It never comes
Hmm.
out the way you want. But I do try to stop deer. Just I don't know. I for my own nerves and be able to settle my pen, I guess.
Yeah. Do you use a slider for your sight? So single pin
Yes.
slider?
Yeah. And what I like to do, I try to range everything there. But one thing that I will do when I sit down is I try to find where a deer is going to surprise me, and I range that and I set my sight for that. So I've got a 2 pin slider. So like if my top pin's at 20, my bottom's at 40, and then it goes like 30 and 45 and on down if you slide it. So if you move the top pin, the bottom one moves again. And I did that because I was going elk hunting, and the guy was like, "Man, this really helps if like the elk is at 20 and then he boogers and he runs up the ridge and he's at 40." You know how a lot of Western game do that a lot when you just have a pin right there
Hmm.
that you can reference and use. But say like I'm hunting a stand and there's a creek crossing over my left shoulder, and there's a kind of a big bottom or a ridge, hardwood ridge in front of me. Chances are, if a deer's coming from that hardwood ridge, I'm gonna see him, and I'm gonna be able to prepare accordingly. But if that creek has like deep cut banks, like we've all seen in the Midwest, like 8-foot cut banks, chances are I'm going to be jacking around on my phone or just looking around, and I'm going to hear a foot splash and look over my left shoulder, and that buck is coming up the creek bank. All you see is antlers, and he's about to turn and go down the creek. Well, I don't have time to range that. It might be 22 yards. Well, I'm going to set my pin at 22 yards
Mm-hmm.
because that's where he's going to surprise me. Anywhere else, I've got time to adjust my shot. And, I've seen a lot of people be like, well, I'm going to set my pin at 50. And if he comes in, I'm going to move it down to 30. Well, a lot of times those deer are just going to come out. They just appear out of nowhere at 12 yards. And that's when you got to shoot him. I don't typically don't shoot past 40. I don't know if I've ever taken a shot past 40, maybe 45. But if I'm going to take a 40-yard shot, it's going to be calm. I'm going to have time. That deer is going to be standing. And so I've got time to adjust my pin for that. So I actually preset my sights for shorter distances. And then if I do get a longer shot that's perfect, I have time to adjust it.
Yeah. I think that's completely logical, because it is funny. We all like to pretend like we have X-ray vision and we're the best hunters of all time, but you'd be lying if you said a deer never caught you by surprise.
Oh, dude. And wind plays a factor in that too. I'm looking at a deer right up here that is my second biggest deer, and I remember I just heard a noise and I looked down and he's directly under my stand because the wind was blowing from them. He was bedded with a doe and some standing corn. And I saw him for the first time at 8 yards. So yeah, they can sneak up on you, man.
Think of I don't know how often you look at YouTube comments, but on some of the you had done a bunch of videos. I think it was in conjunction with the hunting public about like
Yeah.
you broke down and like you animated the anatomy. Is there
Yeah.
any common comment that's like, man, I wish I could just easily explain all of this to them briefly? Like, was there someone that's like, oh, you're way off, or like, oh no, that's wrong, and you're like, well, actually,
Oh yeah.
I truly
I
truly
mean,
believe there's a misconception here, and hopefully you can demystify it right now.
well, dude, I'm an artist and everybody seems to be an artist. So that's one of those hobbies, those crafts where I'm no electrical engineer, but if I'm an artist and I put something out to you, everybody knows what they're doing then. And I've even made mistakes looking back, like, yeah, I drew those a little bit too big. But I'm the one that I kind of like to just let it ride, put it out there and let the content go. um the lungs are smaller than you think they are. I've drawn them too big, admittedly, on some things, but the lungs aren't quite as big as we tend to think they are. Um, the skeleton on the front side, the spine on the front of the deer's body takes up a lot of space. I mean, we tend to think of deer and we look at their hide and it's just like one big barrel. And as long as we get an arrow in that big barrel, we're good. But the spine dips way down, like we were talking about, between the shoulder blades, and it goes up. There may be the brisket on a deer takes up some space. So you can't look at the outline of the deer like a paper target. And as long as I get an arrow inside that outline, I'm good. It's 2 or 3 inches of fat, hide, bone, hair, all that stuff to where we get into the vitals. And I think that we kind of have this misconception sometimes that a deer's body is an outline, and as long as we get an outline in there, we're good. I also think sometimes we think as hunters, every bullet or arrow we shoot is like a laser that just cuts through everything in a straight line, when really it's more like a rock being thrown through the woods or a stick being thrown through the woods. Things can deflect that, and they're not impervious to everything. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And that's the thing about bow hunting too, that'll humble you real bad. Like, we've all done this. Like, a deer's coming in and it's like, I already know I can't wait to text a picture of this deer to my buddies, and it's like, he's going to come in and I'm going to draw, and wherever my pin is when I release is just like a laser that's going to cut through brush and sticks in the deer. And dude, you can't take any of that stuff for granted.
I had one of my. I was just talking with a friend about this. I think it was 2. I did not shoot a buck, and it was mental torture that whole entire season. Like everything that could have went wrong, and I screwed up on a buck the day before. Like I'm going back in there and I'm gonna kill buck. Like I know it, I can feel it. Like the
Yeah.
wind's still good, and here comes a bomber 8-pointer, right? And exactly what you're talking about. I'm full draw, like it's gonna happen, and it's like I felt awesome about the shot, and I'm like, instantly like, oh, why isn't he bleeding? Well, like, I snapped a branch. There was one branch, and it just, the trajectory of an arrow was not in my brain at all. And it's just like, that was just like, to your point, like you're already at that point probably somewhat humbled, and then like that's just like the kick in the gut, like, dude, I suck.
Yep.
I really should have paid attention.
There was so my dad got a bow about the same time I did, and so we kind of learned bow hunting together. And this would have been in like the, I don't know, mid 90s, early 90s. And I remember I was like 13 or 14, just old enough to go hunt by myself. And, we would build the permanent stands 10 feet off the ground and climb up in them, And there was a little 4-point buck. I don't think I'd ever killed a buck yet. And I see him cruising like this creek bottom, and I grunt at him, like I've seen Mark Drury do. And he turns and comes up to me, and I'm like, this is amazing. This is going to work. This is awesome. And he gets up, and it had to be inside of 10 yards. And there was like a 6-inch walnut, the real straight tree, and his vitals came on the right side of that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to shoot him right there. And I shot, and the walnut was only like 5 feet from my stand. And I shot, and it center punches that walnut, and the deer looks around and runs off, and I'm heartbroken. But the kick to the gut was the arrow was like 14 feet off the ground, and you couldn't just go get it. And so for like years, it stood in there as a reminder, like 14 feet up in the air, stuck in this tree and every time I passed it, I was like, man, screwed that up. Those big aluminum arrows, that are like,
is that
we all shot.
Do you think that arrow's still in the tree?
No, I looked a few years and it wasn't. I don't think the tree's there. I think the tree might have got disease or something and fallen over. But I looked a few years.
Yeah.
But for a solid 7 or 8 years, it was like, yep, there's my arrow.
That's funny.
So,
well, any other parting words of advice, encouragement, or predictions as we get deeper into the season?
No, man, I think the older that I get, the more I really appreciate like the atmosphere of hunt camp. I think that one of the cool things is when I get comments or messages that somebody bought my art and it's a conversation piece, and it's like the hit of hunt camp. The best is when a wife does it for her husband for like a gift, and she's like, him and his buddies, they all grab a beer and they go stand around it, talk about it, and look at it at hunt camp, and that's really cool. And I feel like as I get older, you start to think about your legacy. You start to think about what you've contributed, what you've done in your life. And I do feel like I've created some things that have helped like enhance the hunt camp atmosphere.
Yeah.
And could live long past me. I mean, I think it'd be awesome if somebody sells the farm and the hunt camp and one of the grandkids wants the Kirby piece that grandpa used to love and hang on the wall. I think that's cool. So anyway, all that to say, just enjoy it, man. It's just a deer. Like, I learned that from Dave Emkin. There's more of them all the time. I've seen friendships lost over a deer. There's all kinds of drama. And, I'm a busy dude running the business. We've got employees. I've got 2 kids. I coach, all that kind of stuff. I have no tolerance for deer hunting to become dramatic. Like, it's got to be, it's the place where my soul gets refreshed. And and I would encourage everybody to do the same. There's big deer that die every day. There's big deer that come after them every year, and just don't get too caught up in it, and enjoy it, man. Yeah. Look at some fawns through your binoculars. You'll find out some really cool stuff.
I like it. Yeah,
them.
The season goes by quick. I think those are some great words of encouragement and reminders that this is, to your point, a place to recharge, not to get drained, and it's easy to fall into that trap. So people can go where to check out all the prints if maybe they don't have one and they want to add a Ryan Kirby poster so they can all drink beer and talk about it as well.
Man. RyanKirby.com. We just launched a new trout print, actually. Nice. I did the trout species of North America. That's a new one. We've got some new apparel right now, some new hats. Got a few smaller things like sticker packs and stuff like that. But no, RyanKirby.com is our website. Everything else is Ryan Kirby art, all the handles and stuff. So
awesome,
I appreciate the opportunity, man. Good talking to you.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck this year. And hopefully everyone knows exactly where to aim and how to execute now.